Classes in programming are like blueprints. You use them to create objects. These objects interacting with each other then results in a functioning application. Classes also store related code for better separation of concerns, but more on that in a little bit. Hi, I'm Victor, and today in Heights Above Sea Level, we'll be looking at classes in C#. Before we get started, if you want to talk more about this kind of thing, be sure to follow me on Twitch at Height Above Sea Level, where I do some live coding sessions as well as try and answer some of your questions as best I can. This video assumes you have some knowledge on strings, numbers, booleans, and a couple of other things, but if you don't, I have covered those topics in other videos, so I'll link the playlist to the top right of your screen. Alright, classes. Now I said that classes are like blueprints. But what do I mean by that? Let's say you wanted to create an application that deals with a car. So you're going to have to write a bunch of code related to the car. So a car can have a color. Let's say maybe you're working on an application that deals with renting out cars, or you're making a video game. So you'll have a class called car, and each car we need to know something about the car. We need to know its color. We need to know the model name. We need to know if it has 4 doors, if it has 2 doors. And these are what are known, etc. And these are what are known as properties in a class. So the class is going to be called car, and this color, model name, has 4 doors or not. Those are the class's properties. But a car can also do things. It can start, it can stop, it can move forward, it can move backwards, it can accelerate, it can decelerate, and also a couple of other things. So now these things that it can do are called methods. So the car is a class. It has a color, model name, whether it has 4 doors or not, and those are called properties. It can start. The things it can do are methods. The things that tell us more about the car are called properties. So I'm going to cover, I do plan on covering methods and properties in a different videos. So if you're interested in knowing more about them in depth, please subscribe and you will get the notification when those videos come out, God willing. But for this particular video, I'll just be introducing them and touching just a bit on what they are. So why don't we look at a car class and how to create one in C#. But before we do that, remember in the Visual Studio for Beginners video, I think it's not Visual Studio for Beginners, but Visual Studio for 2022 and beyond, I mentioned something about the console application. Remember this file here, this program file on the right, is supposed to have a class called program class. But because we're in a later version of .NET with, let me write that here, it's called .NET. This is the umbrella, like the umbrella above C# and other programming languages, and because of the newer version, that class is no longer in here, and I will leave the link as to why to that video and also as to why this is so. But in previous console applications, you had something like this, a class called public class program, and then curly braces, and you had a method here that was static void main, and inside here you had a string array. Remember the array that I introduced in the previous video? And then we had the curly braces, and whatever you needed to write would go in here. But because this is a newer version, anything you write in here, it's assumed it's being written inside the main method. That way you don't have to create a program class every time. You can just write here, anything in here, and it's assumed it goes inside here. But for now, remember this is a class. As you can see, it's class declared with the class keyword, and this is a method. So why don't we create our own class? But I'm going to use the older version. So let's say in the older versions, this is what it would look like. If you wanted to create a class, you would do it inside here. But for the sake of, actually, let me just put it up here outside the program class. Now to create a class in C#, you need an access modifier. We're going to call this public. Public just says that this class that we're creating is accessible anywhere in this code. You can also declare it as private or protected. I'm only touching on access modifiers, but again, I also plan on making that into a video that I will cover access modifiers a little more in depth, so please subscribe if you want to see that. But a class, you start with the access modifier, the name of the class keyword, and then the name. This name can be anything. This can be a car class, it can be a person class, but for today we're making a car class, and it's public, the class keyword, and the name. So why don't we add a few properties? Remember, a car can have a color. Properties tell us more about the car. So we can have a color. Properties, it's similar. Public, so that it's available everywhere in this application, or when you create an instance of a class called car, which I'll touch on later on. But it's public, and the type, it's a string, and then color. This one uses Pascal case. Pascal case is just a programming naming convention where the first letter of the first word is capitalized. But that's not it. We need to write things, these two, a get and a set. So what are these? A get means you can read this property. So get means that when you create an instance of a class, we'll be able to see its color. If you remove this, let's say you delete this, which you actually can, and just leave a setter. It's giving me an error, but you can do this. You can delete the getter or the setter. So let's say if you delete the getter, that means this is a write only property. You can only write it. You can't set it. But because this is an auto implemented, you need a getter. But again, you can also remove. Again, I'll explain properties later in depth. But just for now, try and follow along as much as you can. But just know that this is just touching lightly, and I'll go in depth in a different video. But with the setter, you can also remove the set. That means we can get this color, but we can't change it. So once this color has been set, anything that wants to know about the car color can only see it. It can't change it. And I will show you that later on. But that's the first property. A car also needs a model name. So model name, again, this is also public. It's a string, and that's the name of the property. Again, get and getter and setter, so that we can see the model name and also change it. But we've been writing this the long way. The short way is to do prop, tab once, tab twice, and then now you're in the integer here. So I'm going to put a Boolean value here, bool, tab again, and then I'm going to call it has 4 doors. Remember the naming convention for Booleans, and then press enter. Whoops, not that. Enter, and then there we go. So one more property we can say is prop int, let's say max speed, so that we know the speed of this vehicle. Then enter. So that's it for the properties. Color, model name, has photos, and max speed. But what about the methods? Remember, a car can start, it can stop, it can move forward, and do a couple of other things. Those are called methods. So how do we declare methods? Again, this is just an introduction. So I'm going to show you how to do it. You say public, which means the method that you're declaring can be accessible anywhere in the code. Void, and then start and parentheses. This is how you declare a method. So what is this void? Void means that this method doesn't return anything. Let's say you wanted to do a calculation. So if this is a method like add, and then it takes two numbers here like integer a and integer b, what's going to happen is that we'll add these two and then we'll return an int. If you wanted this method to return a number, then that number, let's say we can show it on the console, we can show it to a different part of this application. But when you say void, that means that this method doesn't do anything. It doesn't return anything. It does something and that's it. It doesn't return to you any value. So that's just an intro to the method. So the access modifier, does it return a value, or it returns void, meaning it doesn't return anything. And then the name of the method, and then parentheses. For this method, we're going to write in the console. Actually, let's call it start, not add. We're going to write on the console, car has started. Let's declare two more methods. So again, public void, but this one, we're going to call it move forward. But if you want to add method, like not add methods, but if you want to have parameters, let's say we're moving forward, but how fast are we moving? That's why we add this. This is called a parameter. So if you want to specify how fast the car is moving, we'll pass a speed, and that speed over here is what will tell us how fast the car is moving. So string interpolation, remember this string interpolation. If you're not familiar with it, it's in the strings video, then that's also linked in the playlist at the top of your screen. So we can say the car is moving at speed, the parameter, the speed that we pass, and we say miles, whoops, if I can type, miles per hour. So when you call this method, we'll specify the speed, and then that speed is what will tell us how fast the car is moving. And then finally, we can say public void stop. And then we can also say for this one, the car has stopped. The car has stopped. So these are methods. All right. We have our methods and we have the properties. Methods do something. That's why I've named them as verbs. Stop, move forward, we're doing something, start. And then properties tell us more about the car. So we tell us its color, its model name, 4 doors, and max speed. All right. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, please consider supporting me over on Patreon at patreon.com/height above sea level. And all patrons will get this custom Sakura theme that I came up with for Visual Studio. And if you're liking it and you're enjoying the content, please consider supporting me over on Patreon, and I'll give you all the instructions on how to set it up so your code editor looks just like mine. All right, so that is the car class. Now, just like we saw in the enums video, we want this to be in a different file. And why is that? Because right now, you see we're in the program. .cs, remember this, with the way things are set up now, it's almost like this car class is being declared in here, which you can do, but you see now the program class is worried about too many things. It's worried about the car class, and it's also worried about the main method. Why don't we just take all this out and put it in a separate file of its own? That way we have a file that is only interested in the car class, and this gives us better separation of concerns. Remember, I mentioned this in the beginning, separation of concerns. That way each file is only worried about this thing, and this file is worried about this other thing, and there's no mixing, and it makes it easier for debugging. It makes it easier to read. So how do we put it in a separate file? Put your cursor on car, press Alt and Enter, and then actually let me show you how we do it if we were declaring it in here. So you put this Alt and Enter, you move type car to its own class. I think I can even do it here. Alt and Enter for here. Extract base class, change constructor. No, I can't do it from here. Let me just do it the other way. So Alt and Enter, move type to car.cs, click on that. And as you can see, where's the car? It's gone to here. But so far we can see it has extracted this partial class. We don't want this program class to be in this file, so we can delete that. Delete this opening curly brace and delete this curly brace as well. And then highlight this, Shift and Tab to move it to the edge, just so it looks better. And now we have a file with just the car class. And we can remove this partial class, partial keyword. It only put the partial keyword because the program class was in 2 places. So because we're sharing it, it put the partial keyword for us automatically, but we don't want that. So now as you can see, the car is in its own file, and you can see that on the right here as well. And you can see this here, and this is better for, it's a better separation of concerns, and also is good for single responsibility principle. which is just that each file or each class should be responsible for one thing. The program class should be responsible for using all the other classes we create inside this main method, and the car class should be responsible for the car. That way we know this thing is responsible for one thing, this is responsible for the other thing. All right, let's look at how to use this car. We have the blueprint. So this is the blueprint. Now that we have the blueprint, how do we use it? Let's go to the main method here. And I know in the previous videos I've been saying console.write line like something here like hello world. Without this, let me show you what happens without this. And if I press Ctrl and F5, it writes hello world. But with this class, just to show you that it's everything that you write out here is the same as if you wrote it in here, I'm going to write the same thing. Hello world. And you see it's still written on the console. So just so you know that I am doing the exact same thing, but now I've written the code that was used to be there before this program class, and now that's what I'm using. This is just to teach you more about classes. All right, and also you can see console here is highlighted as well because it's a class. So let's say you wanted to use this blueprint to create a class. How do you use it? Let's create a car, and we call it Volkswagen or Volkswagen. I don't know the name. How you spell it? I'm just going to say Volkswagen. Let me say new car. So that's how you declare. You use the blueprint, and we create an object. This right here is called an object, and an object is an instance of a class. So it's almost like a clone. So this is now, yeah, you can think of it as a clone, or if object sounds a bit too fancy, but we use the blueprint. This is now we have a real car. Over here, we just have the blueprint. Here, now we have the car, and we stored it in this variable called Volkswagen. So if you write it on the console, for now, you won't really see anything. It'll just say car. And that's because we created a car class. But here's something interesting. If you put the dot, you will see this wrench and then this cube. If you click on the wrench, it shows you all the properties. Color, has 4 doors, max speed, model name. Remember? Color, model name, has 4 doors, max speed. So we've created a car, and now it has all these properties that you can access. But not just that, we also have access to the methods. You press dot again, and you click on this cube, you see the methods. Methods like toStrings, equals, getType, those are part of the C# language, and they're part of most of the objects that we'll create regardless. Those are like built in, that'll come with all the objects. But look, we have start, stop, move forward. Those are the ones we declared here. Start, move forward, stop. All right, so why don't we write one on the console? So let's say you want to write the color. What do you think is going to happen? Well, let's see. Control and F5, nothing. Why is that? We've created a car, but we haven't specified color. Even if you do this for model name, dot model name, Control and F5, nothing, because these are strings. Remember, the default value for a string, if you don't specify it, is an empty string. But if you look at something like max speed, it's going to give us 0. Control and F5, 0, because the default value for integer is 0. If you don't set an integer, the default value will always be 0. So how do we set this value? We use something called early object initialization. So instead of a parentheses, you put square brackets, and maybe I can remove this comment and put it up here. So now that we have these curly braces, what we want goes in here. So let's say for the color, we can say green, and then comma, we can say for the model name, we can say Volkswagen Mark X. And then next we can say max speed, we can give it like 150, comma, has 4 doors, we can say it's true. And then for the last one, you don't need a comma, you just leave it like this. So now that we've written this, we've created the car, we've stored it in a variable called Volkswagen, and then the color is green, the model name is Volkswagen Max X, the max speed, and has 4 doors. So now if you write the color on the console, because we've said the color is green, what do you think is going to happen? Control and F5, it's going to tell us it's green because we've set that green here. We can do the same for model name. Whoops, I deleted the parentheses by mistake. Control and F5. Volkswagen Mark X. Max speed again. 150. And finally, has 4 doors. True. So that is how we use early object initialization to add, if you want to set the properties of this car. Now, what about the methods? Just like before, we can go to the variable that we created that is a type car. We can say dot. This dot is simply saying go into this Volkswagen and want to access a few things. Now that we've accessed these properties, let's look at some of the methods. So just like the property, we can say start. But the thing about methods, you have to put the parentheses like that. This means that we are invoking the method, we're calling it. You can't just say it this way. It's going to give you an error because it'll think it's a property. But to say that it's a method, you do it this way. Let me remove this. So now that we have this, what do you think is going to happen? What does the start method do? Remember, methods do something. So the start method calls the console and tells it to write car has started. You can see this with Control and F5. The car has started. Similarly, we can also do the same for stop method, Volkswagen.stop. And then Control and F5. The car has stopped. But what about the move forward method? That one was interesting. Move forward. But if you call it like this, look, we get an error. Why is that? Because the move method requires you to put in a speed. How fast are we moving? And that speed goes inside this parentheses, and we can say 25. And you can see now the error is gone and our method is in a good state. But you can't put a string in here because it gets an error. Similarly, you can't put character in here. It has to be a number. Not just any number, a number that is of type integer. Because we've said that here. We can say float if you want to. We can say double if you want to. Or we can even say decimal if you want to. Remember those from numbers? Well, the playlist on the top right of your screen. If you're not familiar with the numbers, you can check out that video and that'll bring you up to speed. But for this one, we're saying int. The number has to be an int. And what happens when you call it and pass a number? It's going to write on the console, the car is moving at the speed you specified. And if I press Control and F5, start method says the car has started. The car is moving at 25 miles per hour. That's the move forward method. Then finally, the car has stopped when you call the stop method. So that is using methods in a nutshell. But let's say right before we finish, I'm winding up, I'm going to show you something known as the constructor. So as you saw before, if you create a class like this, then we don't know anything about it. We don't know the color, we don't know the model name, we don't know if it has 4 doors, we don't know the max speed. This is literally just like the shell of a car. No paint job, just a bunch of metal together with some wheels and an engine. We know nothing about it. But what if you wanted it to be that when you create a car, you have to specify its color, you have to specify its model, you have to specify if it has 4 doors or max speed. That's where something known as a constructor comes in. And a constructor is used for early initialization so that when you're creating something, you say you initialize these properties all at once during the creation process. You don't do it later on. So how do you declare a constructor? You say public. A constructor is always public. and then the same name as the car, the same name as the class, which is car, and then put this way. So a constructor like this is the default constructor. As you can see, there's nothing being passed here, and there's nothing being passed here. If you don't declare a constructor, one is automatically created behind the scenes like this that has no parameters. And that's what gets called like this. But if you want to initialize, you can say string color, string model name, and we can say int max speed. So this is the order when you're creating a class, a car class, you'll order it like this. The first parameter you pass in this parentheses will be the color, the second one will be the model name, and the third one will be the max speed. And then now inside the curly braces, you go to the color in all caps. We set that equal to the lowercase color that we declare over here. So this color is this property, and we're setting it equal to this color. Remember here how we did it before? Basically what we're doing, you see what we're doing here? Now that's what we're going to do in here. So we can say model name is equals to model name. I'm just pressing tab after the suggestion, pressing tab again for max speed. So as you can see, it's similar to what we're doing here. But now the difference is this one is optional. You can do this before you put this constructor. You could either leave it the way it was or add this. But once the constructor is set, that means that you have to specify these things when creating the class. That's why we even have a red underline here, because it is telling us, hey, that's not how you do it. But why don't we save and see how to do this in the code? So now that we have this constructor, we're getting this error because we need to pass three things: the color, the model name, and the max speed inside here. So what do you want the color to be? The color to be blue. We want the model name to be Volkswagen Mark X. And we want the max speed to be, let's say, 200 miles per hour. And as you can see, the error is gone. But even if you miss one, it still won't work because there's an error here. You have to have all three that you specified in the constructor for early initialization. I can even write that here. Used for early initialization. And now that you've already specified this, what you can do, let me remove this, is when you call, if you want to write on the console, Volkswagen dot color, what do you think is going to be the color? Remember, we just specified here in the constructor, as a parameter when creating a new car, an instance of the car class. What that does, that color that you pass, this color is this one. We now make this color property into this color you specified. This model name that you pass here is then becomes this model name over here. You can even see the highlighting. Now finally the max speed, which is specified here, becomes this max speed property. And if you press Ctrl and F5 to write on the console the color, blue, because we just said it here. We can even say model name, Ctrl and F5, Volkswagen Mark X, and finally we can say max speed property, and that is 200. And that right there are classes in a nutshell. I know this is just an intro, there's a lot more to classes than this, but I hope you can take some of this, what we've just learned over here, maybe practice with it a little bit. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments below or on Discord. But I just wanted to give you a little intro to classes for beginners, and I don't want to fill your mind with too many things. This video is probably long enough, so you can take this and try and digest it, try and work with it, and let me know how it goes. But that's all I had for you guys. Have you worked with classes before and are coming from a different language and want to see what classes are in C#? Or did I go too fast? Did I do too slowly? And did you learn something new today? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you did enjoy the content, consider supporting me over on Patreon at patreon.com/heightabovesealevel, and you will get this custom Sakura theme that I came up with, and I hope you do like it. Again, I do stream on Twitch at heightabovesealevel. If you want to talk more about this kind of thing live on stream, and if that doesn't work, come hang out on Discord instead. Just click the link in the description below and become a member of the Water Tribe today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, from me to you, deuces.